And with me today, I have Blythe, who is a dynamic force in the world of betrayal trauma recovery, bringing over 15 years of both personal and professional experience to help women reclaim their lives. As a founder and executive director of BTR.org, the host of the Betrayal Trauma Recovery podcast, and author of the #1 bestseller, Trauma Mama Husband Drama, Anne's journey began with her own experiences. For 7 years of marriage and 8 years post-divorce, she faced relentless betrayals and abuse from her husband and ex-husband. Rather than accept defeat, she turned her trauma into a source of strength, embarking on a mission to help other women navigate the difficult path of betrayal trauma. So welcome to the show, and it's so lovely to have you here.
Thank you so much, Anu. It's so great to be here.
Amazing. So I'd love to learn more about your journey, and it just sounds like you have had an incredible journey of not only betrayal but also success. So yeah, it would be great to understand more.
Yeah. I worked in the pornography addiction recovery industrial complex for years while I was married to my ex-husband. He
Mm.
was I'm going to say in quotes, pornography addict. And so I became this expert in pornography addiction. I ran a YouTube channel for a very popular and well-known pornography addiction recovery practice and went to a lot of therapy, a lot of personal therapy and couple therapy. And throughout that 7 years that we were together, no one ever talked about emotional and psychological abuse. So I was actually being victimized that entire time and did not know it. So I have a master's degree. I was going for help. I was talking to clergy. I was talking to multiple therapists, trying to figure out what was going on, being manipulated and gaslit and lied to the entire time. And in fact, to such a level that I thought that my ex was this oh, uh, wonderful man in recovery who would relapse every once in a while. And when he actually was arrested and I started studying domestic violence instead of addiction, my whole world changed. I could not figure out why these therapists or clergy did not give me any kind of indication that I was being abused, that this was abuse. And so I quit my jobs because I was in shock. Um, and then I thought, I can't stop now. So, under a pseudonym, I started podcasting in real time what was going on and learning about abuse and realizing that pornography addiction is really a domestic abuse issue. It's an emotional and psychological abuse issue, as well as a sexual coercion issue. And educating people about that has been my life mission ever since. My ex continued to abuse me post divorce for 8 years, emotionally and psychologically. He is an attorney. So he was arrested for spraining my fingers, but that was one of the only physical events. I mean, there were a few like physically intimidating events, but overall, this was not physical violence that I experienced. It was emotional and psychological. And I think that's the hardest for women to recognize.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, emotional abuse, it really is. And I feel like it takes longer as well for women to even understand that it was abuse. And it's only when you come out of the relationship that you then realize, wow, that wasn't sane what he was doing. And, that's not normal at all.
No, I
Yeah.
think that my main concern is that women are actually going to get help. They're resisting the abuse. I was resisting abuse for 7 years. I just didn't know
Yeah.
that that is what I was doing. So women are going into couple therapy. They know something's wrong. They're trying to get help. And
Mm.
because they're not educated about this type of abuse, they might look at like a traditional abuse checklist, for example. Does he control your transportation? Well, no, I have a car. Does he control your finances? Well, not really. I can go get groceries. Like, No. And so you go down that traditional domestic violence checklist and you're going to be like, I don't know. In fact, a lot of
Mm.
victims think that they're the abuser when they look at that, especially when it comes to, does he isolate you from family and friends? Because a lot of them aren't isolated. Many of them are. Many of them are. But victims of this type of abuse, they sometimes find themselves thinking, oh, his friends or his family, they undermine me all the time. And so I really don't want to be around his mom, or I really don't want to be around his family. Can we please separate from your family? And so they think when they read that traditional thing, well, maybe I'm the one isolating him from his family.
Yeah,
So it gets very confusing to
yeah,
think like, who is the abuser? What really is going on here? Are we both abusers? And because I'd say that generally speaking, just your average therapist does not screen for emotional and psychological abuse. When you go in, they're going to say, okay, well, this sounds like a communication problem. You're fighting all the time.
so
Let's
true.
work on your communication skills. Let's work on your attachment. Let's schedule date nights, that sort of thing. And that will only make the abuse worse.
So true, yeah, and I suppose yeah, there's massive issues there, especially when it comes to the actual client trying to express what the actual issue is. I know from my own experience, exactly what happened in that room, and then it's hard for the therapist to even pick up on what's going on. So you're right, they're going to jump to conclusions, which it was the same with me, which was, oh, you've got major communication issues,
Mhm.
let's deal with them, just communicate, talk to each other. Wow. So yeah,
Yeah.
there's some major gaps there, it looks
Yeah.
like. Yeah. So what was the hardest part about, facing the reality of betrayal, both kind of during and after your marriage?
I talk about this in the Living Free workshop. So you can get more information about that at btr.org/living free. It's that you don't realize you're living in an alternate reality.
Mm,
So here's one example. This happens to many women, but I'll just share my own experience. They
mm,
might say something like, um, their husband might go to his therapist, for example, and he might come home and say, yeah, I went to therapy today. And the therapist said that maybe you have like bipolar disorder or something. Like maybe we need to get you into therapy. Or it sounds like he said that maybe you're dealing with depression. And so you think that his therapist said this and that maybe this is happening. Well, chances are the therapist never said that.
mm,
Like he is just flat out lying to you. And so your reality is that, well, he said that our clergy said this, or
mm,
he said his friend said this, or he said his mom said this, or his therapist said this, when all of that could be lies. Also, they could have said it, but the reason they said it was because he was lying to them. He didn't give them the correct information. So that's the most mind-bending part of this type of psychological abuse is that they have carefully crafted an alternate reality that they would like to keep you in,
mm.
like a con artist, and they want to maintain that. And they know what they're doing. You don't know what they're doing. So if you have proof that this is happening, then presenting it to them thinking, oh, this will help him get what's going on. I'll show him this and then he'll understand is not going to help because he already knows. He knows full well what's going on and he'll have a reason to get around it. So communication is actually not going to solve any of your problems when someone is using communication to exploit you and alter your reality.
Wow, so that's interesting. Yeah, that was going to be, one of my questions as well, which is like one of the biggest kind of misconceptions around, betrayal trauma. Would you say it's communication?
Yeah, I'd say it's communication. I'd also say that the victim had something to do with it. So when it comes to betrayal trauma, this is more than just he's looking at porn and you didn't know, or he's sexting a coworker and you don't know, or he's soliciting prostitutes or whatever he's doing.
Mm,
It's a lot more than that. the betrayal, there are a lot of, I'm going to call so-called betrayal trauma experts who think that the trauma comes from discovering the betrayal, the sexual betrayal, like discovering that he's been using porn. The most common example in our community is women who are religious, who he's like got the like suit on and goes to church every week, and he's presenting as a very righteous man. He'll even say pornography is bad. And then she finds out he's using pornography. That's like just confusing, right? Like, what? Like, I don't get it. So that's the most common scenario. Um, the problem is that the trauma is not just coming from the betrayal, although that's part of it. The trauma is coming from all of the lies and manipulation, which is psychological abuse. So betrayal is always going to be a domestic abuse issue. It would be very easy for them to say something like, I would like to look at porn. I don't want to have sex with you. I am not attracted to you because I look at porn 10 hours a day and nothing can compete with porn. So I'm just going to look at porn and masturbate, and I don't really want to have sex with you. I'd rather have sex with prostitutes, right? He could say that. They don't. We never meet anyone, any betrayer who does this.
No.
Or they could say, hey, I'm thinking about having sex with my coworker. I wanted to tell you first before I do that. And tonight I'm actually going to go to dinner with her, and I think we're going to have sex. That would be like, okay, that's devastating. But betrayers don't do that.
No, not at all.
And because they don't do that, that is what makes them emotional and psychological abusers.
Yeah, yeah.
So the dishonesty, the lying, the deceit, the gaslighting, that's what makes this an abuse issue. It's always going to be an abuse issue. And to see it any other way is really harming victims, because then they blame themselves. Like a lot of therapists will say something like, well, how can you be safe enough, victim, for him to share his concerns with you? And what, you're going to make yourself safe enough for him to abuse you by telling you that you're not really that attractive to him anymore, but he won't tell you why? He's not going to tell you it's because he looks at porn all the time.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
So like I think the main issue is the lying.
Yeah.
This person has a character of deceit, and so the communication's never going to solve the problem.
True. Yeah. Interesting that. And so, you know, when they say about addictive like behaviors, porn is always up there amongst like gambling and drugs and alcohol. So obviously, you know, it was an addiction issue that he had. So, and it's interesting because did he never ever even like seek help to try and cure this addiction?
Well, that's the issue, is that I was like, oh, he has a porn addiction.
Yeah.
So as his wife, I'm going to support him through his recovery.
Okay.
And he went to 12-step and we went to therapy for porn addiction. But I was being abused the whole time. So that is what I'm trying to get the word out about. Wives, instead of viewing this as an addiction issue for you as the wife,
Yeah.
if you view it as an abuse issue, you're going to get to safety more quickly. Now, might he get his addiction under control? Yes. Right? Maybe he will change.
Yeah.
I believe in change. I hope for change. But you supporting him through his recovery and his relapses is essentially you saying, I am willing, which you're not. I want to say this. Victims are resisting abuse all the time. In trying to get their husband to go to pornography addiction recovery, that is an act of resistance, because if he went to this recovery and it worked and he stopped viewing porn and he stopped being abusive, then the abuse has stopped. So this is a form of resistance. This isn't something that victims are doing wrong. They're doing exactly what they think they should do to ensure their emotional and psychological safety. So they're trying to do that. But in the meantime, the pornography addiction recovery community or therapists are not versed in abuse. So they'll say things like, well, expect relapses, or, well, he's got all these years of addiction. And so, like, it's going to be really hard. Instead of saying to a victim, hey, he's emotionally and psychologically unsafe. Your emotional and psychological safety should be the top priority right now.
Mm,
What kind of boundaries could you set? Because talking to him is only going to put you further in danger.
interesting.
That is what they should say, but they're not saying that. So she's trying to get to safety. Oh, my microphone. She's trying to get to safety and not getting any closer because
Mm,
she's staying in proximity to the abuse. You can observe from a distance to see, are they changing? But they don't want that distance. They want you to stay close so they can continue to lie and manipulate you. The other issue is that someone who really does want to stop doing something, they are going to do it by themselves. So
yeah.
there's never a reason for a victim, even though her intentions are wonderful, but
Mm,
there's never, her intentions are good because she's resisting abuse, trying to stop it.
mm,
So she's not doing anything wrong. But the second that she is like, you need to go, she puts herself in danger because he would have gone prior to that if he was interested in doing that.
yeah.
And if he did not want to engage in those behaviors, he would not be engaging in those behaviors. So you trying to get him to some kind of treatment plan or something is only going to put you in further um,
Harm,
danger.
danger, yeah. Interesting. And I suppose the same principle would apply for, if the partner is addicted to alcohol or drugs, because even with
Mhm.
that, they're lying all the time, aren't they? Saying, "Oh no,
Yeah,
I'm not high," or I haven't had a drink, but they have. And so I guess it's the same principle.
it is
Abuse.
exactly the same. It is abuse. Did you
Absolutely.
see the Netflix series The Maid?
Oh, yes, I did. Yeah.
I really liked that. It showed it very accurately. And in one part of it, I think it's his dad or maybe even her father. I can't remember whose father it is
Mm,
talking about his alcoholism and how, like, he's not the enemy, the alcohol is the enemy. And they'll say that in pornography addiction recovery. They'll say porn is the enemy, he's not the enemy. But
mm,
if he's abusing you, he really is the enemy. Like, he
mm,
might not be your enemy on purpose, but he is harming you.
mm,
What is he? Like, if he's harming you, he's certainly not your friend. If
exactly.
he's lying to you and gaslighting you, like, no matter how much you say, we're in this together and porn is the enemy, like, that's still not going to solve your problem.
Wow. Yeah, it is. I just feel like, God, we've got to change the narrative because I don't even think, I don't know anybody who would even think that it's abuse, that they'd be trying to help their partners, which is natural because, it's a human instinct, we'll want to help people. But then obviously their own needs and values probably get, dampened because it's not about them. And even if they try and make it about them, then they'll get scandalized for that, saying, oh, they're being selfish. Yeah.
Yeah, well, and the addiction recovery community is steeped in misogyny. It
Mm,
really is this misogynistic system where a wife of an addict, her job is to kind of feel sorry for him a little bit. Rather than realize he's dangerous to me, I need to separate from him. The other issue is that safety is very complex. So, for a woman who has, let's say, three children under 6 years old, that was what my situation was. Um, Safety doesn't feel like my husband leaving. That doesn't feel like safety to me, right? Not talking with him and not having him around to, at the very least, help put the kids to bed or help bring a paycheck in or, any of those things. That does not feel like safety. So you have these competing values where it's like, what is safety? And that is what the Living Free workshop really helps women understand, is what is the reality of this situation that I'm living in, instead of living with a partner, which is what you're perceiving. That's the alternate reality that he's sort of set up. You're actually living with someone who is exploiting you. And so to realize this is not a partner, I am in an exploitative situation with a man who's exploiting me. and lying to me, those are two different things. And so trying to ferret out what's going on is the purpose of the Living Free workshop. It really helps women understand or discover, I guess, their husband's true character. So if anyone's listening and they're like, "What is he? Is he exploiting me? Or is he a really good guy who just kind of loses it every once in a while and he's got a temper? Or he just needs to look at porn, like whatever." The Living Free workshop will really help you see his true character, and you might find out that he is a good guy, right? There's always that possibility. But women are always afraid to get educated about abuse because they don't want it to be abuse. And abuse education does not create abuse out of thin air. It's not like abuse was not there and they get educated about abuse and then suddenly their husband is abusive. That's not how it works. If you get educated about abuse, a lot of women see that their husband is not abusive. They're like, "Oh, I was wondering if he was, but now I know he's not because I didn't realize that emotional abuse isn't this." Here's an example. Yelling isn't necessarily emotional abuse. So a lot of us moms, brush your teeth, brush your teeth, brush your teeth. The 20th time we say brush your teeth, we're like, "Brush your teeth already," right? And we yell. Does that make us abusers? And I would say it does not. Do we, when we yell that 20th time, say, "Brush your teeth, you stinking, terrible person. You're so stupid and I hate your guts and you should not be, you should not exist," right? That would be emotional abuse. But just yelling isn't necessarily emotional abuse. It can be, but it's not necessarily, right? Here's another example. Lying, like one time or something, or infrequently, is also not emotional abuse. Someone comes in, they say, "Hey, does this dress look good on me?" And you think, "No, that looks so bad on you." But you're like, you love the person and you care about them, and it doesn't matter that they look kind of weird to you. And so, of course, you're going to be like, "You're beautiful no matter what," right? But that is true. You think they are beautiful no matter what, even if you don't like their dress. So the character is the issue, not the behavior. And that's what trips women up, I think, because they think, "Well, I yell or I lie sometimes. So, what's going on here?" I think it's
Interesting.
important to realize, like, what is the intent
Yeah.
and what is their character.
Interesting. Thank you. Yeah. So, what are the first steps that a woman can take right now to begin reclaiming her power?
So if you go to our website, btr.org, and scroll down to the bottom, you can put your email in there and get our first steps to take, but I'll take you through some of them. The first one would be to get educated about abuse, which is really important. So listening to a news podcast and getting information from her, following her on social media is one of those ways. Um, there's some really great books out there. Why Does He Do That by Lundy Bancroft is one of my favorites. There are some excellent resources for women to get educated about abuse. So I would say that's number one. And with that, do not tell your husband that you're getting educated about abuse. I think the first mistake that victims make as they start on this journey is they read this really good chapter and they think, "Oh, this describes it perfectly. I'm going to take it to him and be like, look, this is what is going on," right? And he's going to be like, "Oh my word, I am doing that. I'm going to stop now," right? That is not what is going to happen. He already knows he does that.
Yeah.
He knows and he makes a choice. So this is not going to be news to him. He's going to read it and think, "Yeah, this does describe me perfectly, but how can I convince her that this isn't happening?" So he'll either blame you for doing it. No, 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 no. This is what you do. Or, and this is the scariest one, he'll say, "Oh, I do that. I'm so sorry. I'll change." And then he doesn't, or he just hides it better because now he knows that you're onto him. So, in order to, as you're getting educated about abuse, just start observing from, just kind of back up a little bit and just observe, how does he choose to act of his own free will without any prompting on your part or talking to him at
Mm.
all. Like, just observe what is he doing. and that will be your biggest indication.
Interesting.
The
Yeah. I mean, oh, sorry.
Oh, no, no, go ahead.
Gonna say like a biggest response, which I know of, is just defense. Men will they'll basically get, put on a defense saying, "Oh, that's not me, blah blah blah." Would you say that's a healthy response?
Well, you know what's funny? It's a healthy response for a victim, but
Mm,
it's a classic response for an abuser. The the abuser and victim responses will be very similar, which is also why women get confused. So if they're in couple therapy and the therapist is like, "Hey, abuser, you need to do this," he's going to get defensive. And then if you say, "Hey, victim, you need to do this," she's also going to get defensive because it's not her problem and she has nothing to do with it. And
mm,
so the therapist is going to be like, "Well, they're both defensive." That's
mm,
why that's not going to solve the issue, right? So the the key is understanding what a victim's response is going to look like
mm,
and what an abuser's response is going to look like. Generally speaking, abusers, I think emotional and psychological abusers, it depends on the type. There's lots of different types, but the majority of my listeners, they actually look better and seem more calm and present more rational than victims. Victims are more distressed and upset. They seem like more like, I'm going to say crazy, even though they're not, because they're like, this is like, no one will believe me. And this isn't what he's like. And, and he's just like, I don't know what's wrong with her. Like, she's been acting like this. I think she's off her medication, you
yeah.
know? And so that's when things get really scary because back in the 1800s, I mean, it was because of coverture laws, men basically owned their wives and they would put their wives in insane asylums and they had no way of getting out. You got to read the book, The Woman They Could Not Silence by Kate Moore. It is amazing. It's talks about the history of this, but that has been the history of the misogyny in the therapeutic community for years, like hundreds of years. And that carries over to now where it's very hard for people to differentiate victims from perpetrators because they do kind of react the same way. And I'm sure women listening are like, yes, that is exactly what happened to me. He seemed so calm. And I was like, ah, right. Yeah.
Very true that, yeah. Oh my goodness. But how about your own book? So, Trauma Mama Husband Drama. So tell us about that.
So trauma mama husband drama, it's kind of a parody of the Llama Llama kids books. And so I wrote it in a similar style and the illustrations are similar. It's not necessarily for children, although some people do use it with their children. When I started educating people about this type of abuse, it's very hard to like go to clergy or a therapist or a friend and like hand them a 400-page book. Now, I do have a very long nonfiction book coming out soon. Right now it's 400 pages. It's in editing. I'm hoping it will be shorter. But what, you just like plunk that thing down on someone's desk. They're kind of overwhelmed. This book goes through all of the book Trauma Mama Husband Drama. Sorry, my picture book that's on Amazon now. And you can also go to my website, btr.org/books, and you'll see it there. But it's a picture book. It's fairly short. And in the back, it has a bunch of infographics about this type of abuse. So it makes it really clear. So if you're trying to explain it to somebody, it takes them through all of the issues in a visual way. And with people's short attention spans these days, it's really, really useful. So it's more for other people to like explain to them what's happening to you. So if it's happening to you and you're having a hard time like getting people to understand you, it's a good one. Although I do recommend the Living Free workshop because it takes you through how to tell who is safe and who isn't safe, because you don't want to give this book to people who aren't on your side because it'll just make the situation worse. But anyway, so I've found that it's really, really helpful and takes people through everything they need to know in a really like super simplified way. So yeah.
Oh, amazing. Yeah. And I wanted to like understand more about your own kind of self-care that you do to manage yourself, because owning a podcast and doing the work that you're doing with btr.org, um you must have to have like some clear boundaries in place as well to ensure that like you're obviously in a healthy place and you're not becoming triggered. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Um I don't know if not being triggered is anything that we can really control. Um, I think that through healing, it comes in time. When I wrote the Living Free workshop is a culmination of what happened when I was podcasting in real time, being abused almost on a daily basis through my ex-husband's messages about my kids. So I said he was an attorney, so he would send like 5 paragraph legalistic messages about our children, undermining their medical care, canceling medical appointments, undermining their extracurricular activities, it just causing chaos all the time. But he sounded very uh upstanding as he did it. It was awful. So on a daily basis, I'm being abused. I'm also podcasting. We also have groups at BTR. We have coaching, right? And at that time, I was using our family wizard. I had boundaries like you would not believe. I was doing everything right. And I would still get triggered. The the treatment for trauma is safety. So if you're still being abused all the time, there's no way that you're going to heal from those triggers. No matter what type of self-care you've got, you're going to have bad days. Um, so I made it my mission, like after I lost a court case because I took in these like evidence of abuse, 40 pages, and they gave him more child custody. It was crazy. I was like, what is going on? I, at that point, I was like, how can I be doing everything right? And I still can't get away from this. So I started praying and pondering, and I'm a Christian, so I was reading my scriptures. BTR is interfaith, so we're not necessarily Christian. I'm personally Christian, but just want to throw that out there that it's not like a religious organization. And so I wanted to study deliverance. And I did. And I discovered these strategies that I started employing. And just through those strategies alone, not in court, a year later, my ex signed basically his rights away to our kids. So now I have like zero triggers because now I'm safe. So when you talk about self care, the first thing is what are my emotional and psychological safety issues that I'm facing today, right? You can do a lot of self care during the process. During those 8 years, I did do yoga. I would go on walks. I would eat copious amounts of chocolate, which I would not necessarily recommend. One of my favorite self care things is when you're in the thick of it is TV. That sounds crazy, but I'm like, it just gets your mind off of it and you can just like take a break, which is nice. Women need a break. But in self-care is not going to solve a safety issue. So even though you can kind of like ground yourself and you can feel peace in the moment, I wrote some meditations that really helped me, and those are at btr.org/meditation. It's called the meditation workshop. I think that really helps. But the safety issue is the thing that women need to be thinking about. Like, how do I actually get to safety? Meaning, how do I separate myself from the harm? And I I want it's hard because many women might not be able to actually do this, but they're certainly not going to be able to do it if they don't think they can. And so my hope is that women will believe, like Ted Lasso, like just believe that you can have safety. And I don't know if you will or not, but that hope and that belief, let that propel you forward because there's a total difference between thinking, this is my life. I'm never going to get anywhere. It's always going to be like this. And I believe that there is some way for me to get to emotional safety. I believe it. And now my only question is how? How am I going to do that? And that change in mindset can really help women come up with some creative solutions to their ongoing abuse issues, whether they're married or divorced, because divorce, at least for me and so many women, does not solve their abuse issue.
Very true. Yeah, absolutely. And that's something which I like to apply with all of my clients and anybody who I speak to who are currently in an abusive relationship. It's to try and get out of that proximity of that abuse, because just being in it, there's not much you can do because you're just surrounded by that low energy, and it's just not safe. So yeah, you have to get
Yeah.
out. So absolutely, safety is number one priority. So yeah, thank you for confirming that. Yeah, I just wanted to ask as well about yourself and future, like what your kind of goals are now with the podcast and with BTR and expanding awareness and support that you are currently doing.
Yeah. Well, once I discovered these safety strategies, I was like, holy cow. Like, I just got my ex to sign his rights away, basically. Like, now
Um,
my kids go with him only one weekend a month, and he lives like 5 minutes away from Friday night to Sunday night. My oldest doesn't ever even go, and nothing happens because now, like, strategically, we figured out how to do that. And only two holidays ever, and only one week in the summer. And I actually wasn't prepared to have my kids that much. It was what I had been hoping for. I've been like, oh, I got to get them out of this bad situation. And then I was like, whoa, oh, wait. I mean, I know they get abused when they're there, but like, how, it was a weird, like, when I finally did deliver them from the situation, it wasn't exactly what I expected, so that's something to be prepared for. But
okay.
um I thought, is this a fluke? Like, is this just me? And so I mentored some other women with these strategies, and it worked. I was like, holy cow. All of them were like, oh my word, this is like really working. So then I wrote the Living Free workshop. And I'm not a coach. It's not really my personality. I am more of a teacher. So if I was a coach, I'd be the world's worst coach because I'd be like, okay, stop talking. I am now going to like get the whiteboard out and like explain this to you, right? The coaches at BTR are incredible. They do a really good job. They're actual coaches, so they take women where they are and go where women want. They're not abuse educators, and that's what the podcast is for educating people. So now it's weird now that I am free because I was working on that for so long trying to like figure that part out. And even as a professional abuse educator, I still hadn't quite figured it out. So now that that's figured out, and the meditation workshop, like all of the things that I had a problem with that I couldn't solve, I solved all of them, and then I was like, okay, now I can teach other people how to do it. So it is a little bit of a weird spot for me to be in now, because if you listen to my podcast, it was like, okay, I've got this part figured out. All right, now I need to get this part figured out. And to be where I'm like, I think I've kind of, I mean, not that I have all the answers, because I'm sure I'll learn something new today or tomorrow, but it feels a little strange. So my book is coming out soon, the one that's around 400 pages, that explains basically all of the traps that women can face when they try to figure out what's going on and they don't quite know. Um, Other than that, it's just to keep podcasting, keep educating people on social media. We have like infographics all the time and illustrations to help educate women about this process. And um, I will just keep working. I work really hard because I can't not help people. It's a problem. I mean, like, I just want to go to the grocery store and get groceries, right? And I'm like going there, and on the way, it's like, this is a metaphor, but I see like four women by the side of the road who are facing this, and I have to stop and help them. And so it takes me forever to get to the grocery store. So I don't think I'm ever going to be out of that phase. I mean, even now, literally, this is not a metaphor. I'll go to a restaurant, and uh, women will be sitting there at their booth explaining what's going on and talking, and I'll be like, that's abuse, and they don't know it. So I time it perfectly so that it's right when I'm leaving, so that I don't have to sit around in an awkward situation. I'll go over and say, hey, what you're describing is emotional and psychological abuse. You're a victim of abuse. I hope you have a good day. Bye. And I like leave because I'm like, they didn't want to hear that. I'm sure that's not what was on their mind. I don't really want them to like hate my guts. So I don't think there's ever going to be a time for me when that is not like at the forefront of my mind, and I'm not trying to help women see this. I
Yeah.
I kind of I wish there was, but there's just, I don't wish there was. I love my work. I love my work, but there's just never a moment's rest when there are so many women out there going through this.
God, honestly, yeah. And like in terms of your own kind of case, is everything settled now? You don't, yeah, that's it. You don't really need to do anything.
Yeah. Well,
That's
now
really
it's interesting because living free is part physical, where they really cannot harm you because you've created so many protections.
good.
They're
Yeah.
still harmful, but you are protected from that. That's one part.
Mm,
But it's also internal. It's also a way of protecting yourself from the inside out. So now, because I'm so protected, I can actually interact with him, which
brilliant.
he's still the exact same person. And I have you know, that charge inside of you that's like that, like that, like hook where you just kind of feel sick or your face gets hot or it's hard.
Yeah.
Um, I, I don't know. It was pretty, the living free strategies. I'm just trying to think of the timeline. I'm really bad with timelines. So if anyone hears my podcast and they're like, I thought she said that happened a year ago. I'm like, I know, I don't, it's all jumbled. I don't really know. But, he, there was a time probably about 3 or 4 months after, and I could be completely wrong, after I got full custody. And I invited him into my house to talk to my son.
Wow.
And he had a protective order. He couldn't come,
Mm,
close. And he was really nervous. I felt fine. I was literally like, there was nothing. There was like nothing in there. And it wasn't scary. I feel like using these strategies, it's almost like I have this internal light inside of me. And when I feel like going just like, oh, like he just kind of like goes away. I don't, that cannot be what's actually happening. It's not like magic, but these strategies work so well that because you're not afraid or scared on the inside,
mm,
none of their manipulation will work, no
yeah.
matter how hard they try. And it's almost like a protective barrier and they can tell and it sort of repels them, I think. That's kind of my theory right now. And as other women start using these strategies, we'll know more later. And that's another I guess thing in the future is now that this is available to people, like hearing feedback and how is it going and how do you apply it? And that is really interesting to me. I have victims on my podcast all the time sharing how they apply the strategies and
Like a
um,
superpower, isn't it? I love that.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
it's really cool.
Yeah. Oh wow, I love that. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, I just think it's fantastic. If you can have that power and control, then yeah, you're right. I feel like any abuser, if it's your ex-partner or your partner at the time, there's like this kind of barrier that they just can't cross. I just think, yeah, that's what you want. You don't want to be giving away your power or control anymore to these abusers, these people who are not even worthy of like an
No,
ounce of your power or
no.
control.
And
Yeah.
and you've never given it, they've taken it. I
Mhm.
think that's the shift that victims need to realize. You've been resisting this abuse the entire time. You haven't been doing anything wrong. They have been taking it from you and you didn't realize it. And once you realize, oh, like they have been exploiting me and I can put up a barrier here and they won't be able to, they
Yeah.
don't have any personal power. They don't have any personal responsibility because that's where power comes from.
Yeah.
And
Mm,
so if you cut that off, they can't get power from you. You're not useful to them anymore and they're like, I don't
yeah.
I can't, this is like she's not useful to me. And that is what they really want, I think. And we don't realize that that dynamic is happening. I think that's the main problem is we're not like, oh, this is the dynamic. I mean, it's like a door-to-door salesman. The only thing you have to do is not open the door,
Yeah. True.
right? Once you know the dynamic and you're like, I'm the one that's powerful.
Yeah.
He's been stealing my power and I have not been willingly giving it away. And
Mm,
I'm powerful and he's not. And that changes everything.
doesn't it? Wow, I love that. So I just think everybody needs to go onto your website and to download your resources. It is downloadable, I think, isn't it?
The lessons are video lessons. It's a little overwhelming. So I just let me explain it really fast. So Living Free is only 2 hours and 20 minutes, but it is actually 55 video lessons. So once you get in there, people are like 55. And I wanted to do it in really short bite-sized pieces because of trauma. Like I wanted the video to be real visual to so women could really understand the concept and how to utilize it. And then there's a question under it where they can either answer or they can just put an X in there to move on. And there's also a workbook so they can process it in different ways because the concepts are stuff that you've like never heard of before, never thought of. No therapist is ever going to tell you this. So it is like kind of mind bending a little bit.
Yeah.
Anyway, the average video is 3 minutes long, but they're anywhere from like 30 seconds long to 6 minutes. So when if anybody gets in Living Free and they're like 55 lessons, I want to be like, just take a breath. Some of them are only 20 seconds long. Like it's in order to like help you process this on a deeper level because the trauma is like I couldn't read for a really long time. Also, people would give me good information, and because of what was happening, I couldn't process it accurately. It wasn't my fault, but like because of that, I've tried to build that in. I have a master's degree in curriculum instruction. So that was like, how do I teach this in a way that can um, break through the trauma to help women know how powerful and wonderful and brave they are? And because the abuse has just told them over and over that they can't do it and that they're not powerful and that he's the one that's powerful. And I just don't think that's true.
No, no, absolutely. Yeah. So it's time to change the narrative, my beautiful listeners, and to just, yeah, take back your control. And please do head on over to Anne's amazing website and also your Instagram as well. I think you're really active on Instagram.
Yeah, I hate doing social media videos. You can see some of them and I'm like, oh, I'm just so bad at it. So I prefer like infographics and illustrations. So my
Teacher.
TikTok is like that. I put it on TikTok and Instagram and on YouTube. You can find it on Instagram at btr.org underscore and share those if you see one of the like infographics or illustrations that you like, please share it with people. I think those get through to people too because visual things, video, podcasting is what really helps victims because abusers just use so many words. You know, words are really like reading is kind of hard, I think, for victims.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I remember trying to read a book when I was under like some severe trauma, and yeah, I just couldn't even read a sentence. So yeah, but and I think it's good what you're doing in bite-sized chunks as well. I think, that's the best way for any trauma survivor to intake information. So
Mhm.
fantastic. Wow. Thank you so much, Anne. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on. And wow, you're just so knowledgeable in this field. And, you've really, I just feel like the way that I'm now seeing betrayal is just totally different to what it was before.
I'm so glad it was helpful. And thank you for your podcast and the work that you're doing. It's amazing. So that's awesome.
Oh, amazing. Thank you so much. And my beautiful listeners, if you've got any questions about this episode, please don't hesitate to ask myself or Anne. I'm sure Anne will be absolutely honoured to hear from you. And yeah, that's all we have time for today. I look forward to seeing you in the next show.